So, my husband thinks he can cheat on me, and he didn't just cheat on me with a colleague or some mistress he found on a dating app. Oh no, he cheated on me with somebody very close to me. But I guess he forgot one thing. My father-in-law, his dad, absolutely adores me. Marrying your first love is the dream of every girl, right? Then for me, why did it turn out to be the moment I regretted the most of my life? Hey, my name's Ella, and I worked as a finance manager in a multinational company. It's also something my husband has never liked about me, as he kept on talking about how women are not considered wise when they try to handle finances. I ignored his comments, thinking he cared too much about my reputation in the workplace. Coming from a middle-class family and being raised by a single mom reduced my chances of getting standard education and job opportunities. My mom supported me and overworked herself to make sure I attended the best school and fulfilled my dreams. Then it happened. In business school, I met David, and that was when our love story began. I still don't understand why I was so desperate, because within 2 years we tied the knot, indicating the start of our new journey together. Maybe it was my selfishness that I liked the way he gave me attention, despite my background, or it was my innocence and naiveness to trust him with all my heart. After 3 years of our marriage, I got all my answers, along with the heart-wrenching proof, lying comfortably in front of my eyes. David and I were in love. Really in love. There was nothing more I ever wanted, and I never cared if he was rich or owned a business. I just wanted his love and support, nothing more, nothing less. Was that too much to ask for? Then why did he get distant all of a sudden? I have no idea. All of a sudden, he starts spending more time out of the house. We stopped having movie nights, going to clubs, or having fun, and I can't even recall when we last had fun. He always excused me for being busy with business, and I kind of thought that was it. I tried to be understanding and not even for once to suspect him of anything. Life was smooth because I was ignorant, but then it all shattered. It all began that day when I stepped out of my car as soon as I reached the parking lot of my house. Still having the uncomfortable feeling, the sickness made me return home early, so there I was, stepping into my house with fresh juice in one hand, the keys jingling in the keyhole as I unlocked the door. My breath was fast, and the first thing I wanted to do right then was lie in my bed and sleep. My eyes felt heavy with the burden of sleeplessness, and it had been recent, and I was already sick of it. The room glowed when I switched off the dim lights, and I removed my black wedge heels, made my feet comfortable, and relaxed as soon as they rested on the cool, flat floor. I slipped into my sleeping gown, not tying it up, of course, because I didn't need suffocation anymore. I slid into my bed under the covers, but something caught my attention. The scent. That citrus, woody, musky smell seemed unfamiliar. I prefer floral perfumes, while David was sporty fragrance, and it was unsettling as I kept inhaling the fragrance and my mind kept entangled with millions of thoughts till my eyes shut and I was asleep. When my eyes opened, the blurry vision of the dim lights in the room was the first thing I noticed. I could still smell that unfamiliar scent, and it brought back the last thought before I slept. I felt better physically then. Maybe it was just some rest I needed. I stepped on the floor, got up, tying my copper-colored silk gown, of course. I opened the drapes and looked at the tall building of the city. Loneliness crept into my body, and that made me miss David. The old version of David who had nothing in his life but me. His well-established inheritance, business, and luxurious life used to mean nothing to him when I was with him. I was undoubtedly the luckiest woman on earth. Then it seemed like a dream that he would show up at my office whenever he missed me and take me out for long vacations. I could not see it happening anymore. It seemed like he was tired of me, or not as energetic as he was before. I wish I knew him better, and I wish I could dig deep into his heart to see what was inside of it. He was good at hiding his feelings, and maybe it did bother me, not as much anymore. From the days we got married, my father-in-law has always been the person who supported me. He made sure that we got together more often, and he would come to visit us to have family time. I never opened up to him about how it had been between me and David. I thought it might get, settled, but it was happening otherwise. I opened my cupboard to get my shirt out when something caught my attention, and I froze. It took me a minute to get out the frozen state I was in and pick up the pieces of lingerie laying on the floor, half hidden beneath the cupboard. It felt strange. Why were unfamiliar things appearing in my room? But at the time, I just ignored it. Again, it was in my mind, but still a thong could not alone explain the story, so it was better to just, I'd say, leave it. But there was no possible explanation for what I had seen in my bedroom. I mean, absolutely nothing. David had to explain. At least, I should ask him first. Maybe it was nothing like I thought. I shop a lot, and sometimes I forget my lost clothing was the explanation I came up with. Later that night, I heard the door opening and him entering the house. My heart was racing, and I was not sure how I should start. Should I confront him right away, but confront him with what? It was not even related to him. My heart ached with the thought of him sleeping with another woman. In the morning, sunshine filled the room, and I saw David sleeping on the other side of the bed. I turned towards him and ran my fingers through his hair. I loved him, and I'd always loved him. He's been my priority and the only man I've seriously ever loved. I could not see why my world would be crumbling and collapsing, but I needed to know the truth. Without giving it a second thought, I grabbed his phone and I opened it up. It was 10 unread messages, and yes, I opened up the chat. There were messages from a girl who was asking him to meet her. To my surprise, she was with him last night outside her house, and when they saw my car parked, they knew I was there. This all explains the food for two that he bought last night, and her messages showed how frustrated she was because I was home and she could not come over. Hell. My world crashed and my heart broke, and he had been cheating on me for this whole time, I guess. I questioned myself. How could he do it? And then there was not even a single shade of guilt on his face. What should I do next? I was absolutely clueless. I could not imagine my life had just flipped. I needed to confront him, as it was all on the surface. David woke up and kissed me on the forehead and said, "Oh, good morning, babe," and went into the shower while I sat on the bed, unable to absorb anything. I squeezed the cushion and buried my face in it and cried as loud as I could. The only happiness I ever had was him. My life circled around him, and that day I lost the center of the nucleus of my life, and when he came out, I questioned him about the messages I read, and about other things I found, and he denied it at first, as if he was all innocent, but he wasn't. The messages clearly told what he has been up to. I was full of anger and rage that he was lying to me. I showed him messages and the things I found, and he had no answer, obviously. It was clear that he's been cheating on me, and to my surprise, he was standing in front of me shamelessly lying, not a single sign of regret on his face. He had given up. He was ready to let me go, and it was clear from the gestures. Then there was no use of staying, and I just had to leave. I burst into tears, and I got off my bed, hurriedly opened my cupboard, and started packing my suitcase. He was obviously not happy with what I was doing, and he knew Dad was never going to be happy with that. He knew Dad was on my side, but I told him clearly that he had no more rights to stop me anymore, and it's best to leave at that moment. Staying there was of no use. As expected, he stood there speechless, and I just quietly packed my bags as my choice was clear. I left everything behind. I didn't want even a pinch of his luxuries. I left the house and took a cab to the airport. It's true that I didn't really have a massive amount of money, as I had been running my mom's house ever since I got a job, but thank goodness for savings that I did have. I got onto that airplane, and then the only place I had to go was my mom's. After an hour, I reached my destination, and I was not sure if I was going to tell her about what happened between me and David. I guess I won't. I hadn't left him. I just wanted space. Maybe we both needed to clear our minds, but I was wrong. I was sure that he would realize his mistake, and he could not deal with the confrontation and came up with arguments. I thought he would come back at me, and I had left a bit of false hope. Update number 1. I stepped out of the cab, and when I reached the destination, my mom's house was half an hour's driving from the airport. I rang the doorbell of the small cottage, and upon ringing for the third time, the door flung open. I saw my mom standing in the doorway, and as I hugged her, As soon as I saw her, she was very surprised to see me there without notifying her. As always I did, and she was curious to know how I had planned it all of a sudden and why David was not with me. I had to lie. I told her that he's on a business trip and would be out of town for some time, so I thought of visiting her. I asked her about my grandparents and Lara. She told me that Lara found a job in my city and was living there. Lara never visited me, though. My cousin Laura has lived with our grandparents since her parents died, and she often visits my mom and stays with her for months. She's like a sister to me, and I wish she were here. I took my luggage to my room where I spent my childhood and teenage years, and every corner of my room reflected my life back then. And the stickers on the wall always make me smile. It reminded me of the struggles my mother had to raise me, and she never, took help from my wealthy grandparents once. The truth is that my mom got pregnant with me in her teenage years, which was not a pleasing news for my grandparents. For some time they abandoned her, which was the most challenging time for her. My father stayed loyal and married her, but the happiness just did not last that long. A few years after my birth, he passed away. It was an accident. Hearing the news of my father's death melted the ice from my grandparents' hearts, and they immediately forgave her. My mom refused to go back to them for any sort of aid, and she wanted to raise me on her own. Yet she visited them, and they were back to good relations. Amidst my thoughts, I realized that I was feeling sick again. To be cautious, I took the test the other day, and I was still waiting for the results. It wasn't an unknown fact that time. Indeed, was not in my favor right now. From the day I returned to my mom's place, I had been thinking about what I had left behind. Should I go back? Is that a good idea? I questioned myself. He had not even called me once, and my pathetic self was just expecting him to. It was better to let things go with the flow, I guess. Update number 2. Hey, a week has passed since I've came here, and still nothing from him. In the morning, I woke up with more sickness, which I am already tired of. Starting my day with a cup of coffee, I opened my laptop to check my emails. I'd applied for 2 weeks of work from home, and I was sure that they were not going to give me an extension. I kept working for a couple hours when I checked my inbox and found an unread mail. It was from the hospital, most probably the reports. I hastily opened the mail and checked the reports, which said that all the suspected tests were regular. But my pregnancy was positive. What? I was pregnant? I instantly called Hannah, who was my friend and a doctor. She broke the news of my pregnancy, and oh my goodness, I was not expecting it. Already things were not good between us, and I was not sure if this pregnancy would bring us together or what, and I wasn't sure of anything yet. What made me excited was that after hearing the news, David would forget everything. Our baby would bring us back together and reignite that love and passion we once had. I really hoped that, and I knew it was all going to be good now. My mind changed, and suddenly I thought about it all in a positive way. In the evening, I received a call, and to my surprise, it was from David. I knew it. He would call me, and he did, and I could be more thankful for the good that he had started happening. I knew he could not stay away from me, so I picked up the call super excitedly, and I had to tell him the great news. When I said hello, I could not control my silent tears. But the excitement was short-lived, and what he said was so unbelievable. He called me to inform me that he was sending divorce papers, and I did not need to return ever again. Instead, I should stay where I was and never show him my face again. I stood there shocked, not knowing how to react, and my sobs became loud screams when my mom came to my room. I told her everything while crying. I knew I was devastated and losing it all right now, and everything seemed blurry, and I felt like I was transitioning into another phase. When I woke up, I found my mom sitting and just crying next to me. My head felt heavy, and I didn't feel like talking anymore. I had made a decision. I would go back to see what he was up to. How could he leave me so quickly? So the next day, I flew back to my mom's house to his. And I still had the key to the house, so it was not hard for me to sneak in. I heard voices, happy waves of laughter, giggling. I heard moaning and voices full of excitement. As I reached the bedroom door, I knew it. Both voices seemed familiar. David's voice, obviously, I knew it, but why did the other sound oh so familiar? I need to find out. I flung the door open, and what I saw was hard to believe. He was making love to another woman, and when he turned around to see who it was at the door, she got up from beneath him, and there she was, Lara, lying underneath him with her smeared lipstick and half-naked body covered by him. After they both noticed me, they grabbed the sheets and wrapped them around themselves while I stood there in disbelief. He's been cheating on me with my cousin, whom I consider closer than a sister. So this was what they have been doing behind my back, huh? I questioned David. I kept screaming and shouting at him, and I said every bad word to them, and I wanted to destroy them at that very moment. They both had no answer, no questions, nothing, and I didn't want anything either. There was nothing left between us, and I thought that was the end of it. I felt hopeless, and I knew I had nothing left. My marriage had come to an end while another life was growing inside me, and I could not go back to my mom now. I needed to continue this job as that would be my only source of income, and for that I had to find a place here. Update number 3. Hey guys, I had no idea where to go and what just happened, and I walked down the street clueless, and right then I needed an affordable place. While I thought of the next step, I heard a car stopping near me. When I looked up, I found a black car whose door opened for me, and when I got near, I smiled and got into it. On our way, I told Dad everything. To my astonishment, he already knew. He's seen everything that day. The car stopped near a huge mansion, the one that I just imagined, and I stepped out of the car, and so did my father-in-law. He took me inside, and I could not stop noticing the small details of such a lavish house. My father-in-law was so displeased after he heard everything. To my surprise, he knew everything. He had seen them together even before I arrived. But then he told me his story. It was hard to believe, but this is what happened. David's mother did this too. She left his dad for another man, and it was a love marriage, and to him she was everything. She was intelligent, beautiful, and he did everything to make her happy, but it was simply not enough for her. He trusted her blindly, but what she did was the worst. She cheated on him with his best friend. His best friend whom he could only trust enough to send home to pick up his stuff while he was not around. But what did he do? He took his wife. And when Dad found them both, she reacted exactly like David did. She blamed Dad for, instead of it, just feeling guilty herself. She walked out of Dad's house with him in front of Dad, and nothing could have been worse. It was true that the apple does not fall far from the tree, and children are exact copies of their parents. I wondered why David never became like his great dad, and I wish he was so much more like his father, so morally upright and a man of great character. I thought Dad understood me more than anyone right then and there because he had been through exactly the same situation that I was. Well, Dad, as I already mentioned, was my support system. He guided me like a father does, and he could have supported his son, but no, he supported the right one, and here he knew what was wrong and who was right. He taught me how to take revenge and not let both go without paying for it. He himself did not spare David's mom. He punished them both in his way and wanted me to do the same. He even gave me the courage and confidence to do so. I absorbed all of his words, every one of them, and I thought that he was right. I could not let them go that easily, and the plan was already developing inside of my head. He took his hand out of his pocket, handed me keys, and told me that those were the keys to my new apartment and my new car, and that I did not need to worry about expenses, and that he was with me. Could I be more blessed? I could not hold my tears back, and David had been nothing like his father. Mr. James was such a great man, yet he had to endure so much. After spending an hour with him to have dinner, I left for my new apartment, and the brand new car he gave me was even better than my previous one. The apartment, too, was luxurious and seemed very expensive and highly ornamented. Dad had a lot of expensive properties, not just in the city, but everywhere. He even asked me to bring my mom here so that she could live here comfortably, and David never allowed me to take my mom with us. We lived in a massive house with several luxurious rooms, but still, he didn't want anyone except us, and I knew why. Ugh. I'd already called Mom and sent her a ticket for the flight, and she'll be here tomorrow. But right then, I had something more important to do. I called my grandparents and told them everything Laura did and how she lied about getting a new job here while she was busy seducing my husband. My grandparents were furious to find out this, and they had suspected her of being involved with the rich guys before, and they knew she wanted to move to the city and lead a luxurious life, but this was what she did to get one. Grandpa said that I did not need to worry. She was going to pay for this, and he was going to cut her off from everything. She was going to be on her own now, and they had no connection with her anymore. This is what she deserved. Misery. Final update. Guys, years have passed, and I was just absolutely blessed. I was. With a baby boy who is now 5 years old, I named him Thomas. Unfortunately, he looked like his father with the same pair of blue eyes and brown hair, and anybody could tell by just looking at him that he was David's boy. But I would have never let him inherit his character. I wanted Thomas to be like his grandfather, who had been a great man. Thomas was also the reason why I could not take my revenge immediately, as I was pregnant and my first priority was my kid. And that's why I planned it for later on. Unfortunately, Dad died when Thomas was 3 years of age. I wish Dad were here with us. Before dying, he changed his will. To my surprise, he had shifted half of the property to me, which was supposed to be David's, and the other half to his daughter, my sister-in-law. I was the CEO of his company, and my life literally changed entirely. My mother lived with us, we were a small happy family, and I had no idea where David and Lara were. David was kicked out of the business and property right then, and I didn't even want to know where they were now. I just wanted to forget it all. At least I had burnt them alive, and I could never have done this without Dad's help. He helped me in bringing David down and lifted me up. David and Lara did not last long together, guys. She left him the day David was kicked out of the house, property, and business, and she was with him just for the money. Lara wanted nothing but money. My subconscious still believed that at least David would have realized his mistake of leaving a woman who could sacrifice anything for him, let alone money. For the woman who just used him as a credit card. She took all my jewelry and money from the locker and left, and I had to make her suffer. This was the golden opportunity. When Dad told me about it, I filed a complaint against her for the theft. Lara had to go to jail for stealing my property. Thomas and I were in the mall, and he wanted new toys, so I brought him here. When we returned to the parking lot, a man approached us, a complete stranger with his ground beard and disheveled hair. He said that he was David, but obviously it's hard for me to recognize him now. David? From a wealthy, young, and handsome business owner? What had he become? He dropped to his knees and cried and was sorry and pleaded. Oh my gosh, I could not believe it was happening. Finally, he's on his knees and saying sorry to me. He looked at Thomas, and after realizing it, he asked if it were our son. He blamed me for hiding his baby from him for so long, and I mean, how dare he? After doing all that, how can he even think of the possibility of me letting him meet my son? David was angry and tried to approach Thomas, introducing himself as, well, his father. Thomas was not pleased with his presence, and he starts kicking him away. He clearly didn't want him around, and he called him a madman and ran away from him. Thomas's reaction was a huge slap on David's face, and I thought he got his answer too. Still, I warned him to never cross my path again, and after that I turned around, but he stopped me. Instead of feeling guilty for what he did or having even a slight sense of regret, he starts gaslighting and accusing me. He warned me to stop thinking that I was a big shot or anything, and just because his dad helped me didn't mean I was something. He belittled me by calling me still poor, ugly girl who chased after him and practically forced him to marry her. David did not let a moment waste to show his true colors every single time. My mother grabbed my arm gently, signaling me to let it go, but this gentleness was what made me a fool in front of him. I smiled at her and confronted David. I told him that he was right, and I was still poor because I didn't have the expensive skill of cheating on my partners. I stepped closer, looked confidently into his eyes, and told him that, well, what Dad's last words were. He regretted having borne him as a son, was what Dad told me before he left this world. The expression on his face was something that brought me a new sense of calmness. It was the one I always wanted to see. Shock, betrayal, reality of facing the truth. Update, many additional updates. Guys, after a few days, I reached out to David and offered the job of an assistant finance manager in my company. He and his ego disagreed, and later I got the news that he had joined my competition's company. Only after a few months I learned that he's accused of fraud in the company's finances and illegal money withdrew from the company's accounts. Now both Laura and David are rotting in jail. This is the end of the betrayal they have to suffer now, and this thought makes me feel relaxed and happy. All these years, every night I've been planning it, every night I wanted revenge, every night I cried. I was in immense pain, but I knew one day I would be the happier one. And they were paying for their sins. Now it's finally happening. I'm happy, and a sense of relief has filled my heart. I'm raising my children in the way I want, making him just like his grandfather. We are small, happy family, just me, Mom, and Thomas. I'd always wanted to burn him in the flames of my revenge, but I forgot I had a better option. Justice. Sometimes when I look back at life, I feel happy about what happened. I got to know the true evil side of David and got separated from him. I'm happy now. I'm happier ever than I've been, and maybe I was meant to find my happiness alone. I mean, the absolute icing on top of today's story was the fact that the father-in-law literally went through the exact same thing that OP did with his significant other. And guys, that is just so insane. It's almost poetic. I want to know your thoughts about today's story. If you were in OP's position, would you have done the same thing? I think I would have gone to the father-in-law a lot faster. And we did realize at the end of the story that OP basically took everything with the settlement, and now her ex can't even get a job at town. I want to know your thoughts one more time, guys. My name's Mr. Reddito, and yes, I narrate these stories every single day. So, if you want to be a part of these daily readings, make sure you subscribe. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and yeah, it's cool to be kind. See ya.